So you grew up in Brooklyn, as we've talked about, and your father had a store, Linda's. Your name's right there in the title store, and then
Right.
you're there at age 12, and you're watching your father extend credit to all of your neighbors, right?
Yep.
What kind of impact does that make on you? Yeah.
My father, I would say even subconsciously, was teaching me things that I realized so much later in life. My father, I remember this so clearly. He had like a little library that was like on the left-hand side, actually facing the glass window out to the street, with a whole bunch of marble composition books. And he knew, I don't know how he knew, but it would be like a customer would come in, and they would say, Nick, this week or whatever, they'd explain something. And my dad would be like, don't worry about it. And then he would pull out a marble notebook and he would know which one it was. It was like 4 or 5 of them. And he would know that that person belonged in a particular book. And he would open the book and he would turn to a specific page. And I would notice there was a person's name at the top. And he would put 1447, 1819, whatever the amount of the groceries that came out that day. And my dad's store was in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, and it was a predominantly Black, Caribbean, Puerto Rican, and other Latino communities, but predominantly Black and Caribbean, and also a very significant Orthodox Jewish community. So, for example, for many folks who don't know, some Orthodox Jews, depending on what sect of Judaism they follow, on Fridays they cannot touch money. And so sometimes you would forget a grocery or you would forget something that evening. So my dad would just write it in the book and they would take the bag with the groceries and they would just leave. And I thought it was really interesting. I was like, what's going on here? And then I was like, how do you remember? And then my dad's like, I don't have to remember because these people always come back and pay their, what they owe me. And my dad taught me empathy, and he taught me that sometimes people go on hard times, and sometimes people aren't able to pay for groceries or whatever the situation may be. And that was something that taught me how to treat other people. And as I thought about it later on in life, as I think about fighting for a higher living wage in America, or working with labor unions, or supporting union workers. People shouldn't have to struggle. People shouldn't need a person like my father to just pay for basic groceries. My dad had such deep relationships. He knew everybody's name and the customers. He knew people's children. He would congratulate people on, oh, congratulations on your son's wedding. Congratulations on your new granddaughter. And I'm like, how do you remember all these life moments? He's like, because they tell me. And I'm like, but I know, but there's a lot of people who come into the store. And he's like, I've been here for 40 years. I've raised some of these kids in this community. And so for me, my father taught me what it means to be in community, and to be in community with people who don't look like you, who don't share your faith. And that's something that I tried to carry with me in my work. And it's why I wrote a book. We're in this together, because my dad showed me that we are really in this together.
No, something I wonder about is that many marble books, that many outstanding debts. I assume sooner or later it had to have happened that somebody didn't come back and pay their debt, and that never made the impression on you the other way that, hey, some of these people are going to run out on us. We should be more strict. We should be more careful. Or was it just always a matter of you saw the good and that far outweighed the bad? Or
my dad, so I used to always ask my dad that. I'm like, are you sure? Because sometimes I would look in the book and there were like a page or two where you'd see that the numbers weren't crossed out, and that meant that the person didn't pay, right? And my dad would say they would eventually come. They might not have it right now, which is why they didn't come back. And I would say to my dad, but what if they never come back? And then my dad has his own little motto, his own little saying that says, when you bless people, you will be blessed. And my dad's like, I am good. Like that $20, that $40 is not something that's going to impact me. My dad was a very successful small business owner. He was an immigrant with a 5th grade education that came to America with barely any money in his pockets. He lived in an apartment with like 5 other single immigrant men as well, who were also trying to make it. So my dad struggled when he first came to America. He really had a hard time until he got to a place where he was able to buy the small business on the corner of a street in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. And so for my dad, he knows where those people are coming from. He's been there, done that. And so he's been blessed in America. My dad believes that he is one of the people who has lived the American dream. And so for him, for the people that never came back, it never outweighed the people that did, and it never outweighed the blessings that the community that he was working in gave him. I mean, those people in the community, my dad never saw them as customers. He was like, these are the people that pay my mortgage. These are the people that help me give to my children. These are the people that are helping me. I have a car. So my dad just looked at the world in just a different way. And he came from living under a military occupation. So for everything, for my dad, it was a blessing. Everything. I mean, he saw the most basic things that we take for granted. My dad thought they were like the most amazing things. He's like, look, in America, like our kids go to free public school. And then like that for him was like such a, like, it's a dream come true. He couldn't believe it that in America we have free public school. Anything that my dad, at the time, this was funny, at the time in New York, water was free. So now, as you know, we pay for water in New York. And my dad would tell me, he's like, look, in America, the water is free. And so my dad just really was a simple man that felt like he lived a good life. And we lived, if I compared myself now as I traveled the country and the world, we were probably lower middle class. I mean, we lived in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, and we lived a good life, but it wasn't, a lavish life. But I thought it was lavish, and my dad thought it was lavish, because if you compare where my parents came from to their experience in the United States, it was for them blessings upon blessings. And so my dad always kind of taught me, like, it's not about material things. It's about, are you happy? Are you content? Are you safe? And those are the things that were the indications for my father of living a good life.
I know you you're one of 7 children, right? So you and your siblings were all donating to the program to Save the Children. Mm-hmm. And you would ask your parents, why doesn't everybody have what we have? And they would told you, because God is testing your character, your faith, mm-hmm. and resilience. He gives some to you and you give to others. Do you still feel that that's true? And does that motivate some of the work that you do now?
Oh, 100%. I mean, growing up, my dad was the guy that watched television and saw these commercials for Save the Children, and we would watch it. And because of the way that our father raised us, we would be so horrified by this idea that here we were playing with toys. We had a TV to watch. We went to public school. We had friends. We had joy in our lives growing up, and we play outside with our friends, and we had shoes and just the basics of life. And to see that there were children around the world that did not have what we had. And my father let us sponsor a young girl. And my dad said that she was our sister and that we were responsible for her. So, of course, our family are young. I was the oldest, and I was maybe like, I don't know, maybe 10 at this time. And that means that I had siblings who were six siblings who were younger than I. So imagine a 10-year-old with 6 siblings who were younger, which was a lot of kids to have all at the same time. And my question, and my sisters also were like, but why do we have things and they don't have things? What's different about this, young girl? And my dad would say, because in the world that we live, we're all here to be tested about what we would do with the blessings that we have. So my dad would teach us, like, you have, right? You're saying you're happy, you have. Yes. Okay. What are you going to do with the things that you have? And especially the extra things that you have. And then the idea, my dad's concept was that you give it to others, and then that you will then be blessed again. And so that is my work. I believe that I feel quite privileged, even though I've been through pretty horrific things in this country based on some of my activism work. But overall, I am a very privileged person. I feel that sometimes, I remember one time Bernie Sanders, who many of you know ran for president, said something that really kind of encompassed what I believe: fighting for someone you don't know. And I think that in some sense, that's what I want to do, fighting for someone that I don't know, to share whatever blessings I have. If I have rights, then I want to fight for someone else to have rights, in hopes that we all have rights. And it is a concept that comes from these young interactions with, parents. Both my parents were people who also believed, like, your neighbors can't go hungry. Like, you can't go to bed at night knowing that your neighbor is hungry, or that a child, like our next door neighbor's mom, didn't come home from work on time and we're eating after school. My mom was not going to let our next door neighbor not eat because his mother had to stay an extra 2 hours at work. My mom was making sure that our immediate neighbors, who were our friends, also had what we had.